All right, so you ready to get in some Bardstown mysteries? Buckle up, because things are about to get a little dark.
Yeah, we're talking about a town known for its beauty, its bourbon, and well, a string of unsolved cases that really shook this community to its core.
Exactly. It's this contrast that makes it so fascinating and so unsettling. This place was even named the most beautiful small town in America. But underneath that pretty surface, there's a darkness, a history of violence that's hard to ignore.
And that's what we're going to try to unpack today. We're diving deep into these Bardstown mysteries, trying to understand the timeline, the possible connections, and the questions that continue to haunt investigators and the families involved.
So to set the stage, we're looking at Bardstown, Kentucky, a seemingly peaceful town with a dark underbelly. These cases span from 2013 to 2016, each one unique, but with an eerie proximity in time that's hard to dismiss as just coincidence.
Right, it's that timeline that really grabs you. It's like clockwork, almost a new tragedy every year.
Yeah.
It begs the question, is there something more sinister at play here?
Let's start with the first case that really thrust Bardstown into the national spotlight. The murder of Officer Jason Ellis back in May 2013.
Ellis was a decorated officer, canine handler, well respected in the community. He was on his way home from his shift, driving down the Bluegrass Parkway when he encountered a roadblock.
Not just any roadblock, though, right?
No, this was deliberate. Someone had intentionally placed tree limbs across the exit ramp, forcing Ellis to stop. His dashcam footage shows him getting out to move the branches, and that's when the ambush happened.
Multiple shotgun blasts just like that.
Exactly. The attack was quick and precise, suggesting someone with knowledge of firearms and possibly even police tactics.
And despite a massive investigation, a $200,000 reward offered, no one has ever been charged with Ellis's murder.
The case went cold, leaving behind a mountain of questions. Who would target a well-liked officer like Ellis? Was it a personal vendetta? Was he getting too close to something, or someone dangerous in his line of work?
And lack of answers just adds to the mysteries, like whoever killed him vanished into thin air.
It's chilling. And then just over a year later, in April 2014, Bardstown is hit with another devastating blow. The double homicide of Kathy and Samantha Netherland.
A mother and daughter brutally murdered in their own home.
Kathy was a special education teacher. Samantha was a 16-year-old high school student. The crime scene was horrific. Kathy had been shot multiple times. Samantha suffered blunt force trauma, and both of them had their throats cut.
It's hard to even imagine the level of violence unleashed in that house. What could possibly have motivated such a brutal attack?
That's the question that's plagued investigators from the beginning. Robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. Nothing seemed to be missing from the home, and the level of brutality pointed to something much more personal and sinister.
But there were some strange clues, weren't there? Things that didn't quite add up.
Yeah, like a few months before the murders, Kathy had posted on Facebook about someone shattering her glass patio door. Was this just a random act of vandalism, or could it have been connected to the murders?
And there were witnesses who reported seeing a car speeding away from the Netherland home that night, but the vehicle was never identified.
Right, so you have these pieces of the puzzle, these potential leads, but nothing that leads to a clear suspect or a motive.
It's like the killer or killers just vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a community reeling from yet another senseless tragedy.
And that feeling of unease that something is deeply wrong in Bardstown only intensified with the disappearance of Crystal Rogers in July 2015.
Crystal was a young mother of 5, and her disappearance sent shockwaves through the town and beyond. She was last seen on July 3rd, and 2 days later, her car was found abandoned on the Bluegrass Parkway with her purse and cell phone inside.
It was as if she had just stepped out of her life and in thin air.
Crystal's family insisted that she would never willingly leave her children, especially not without any contact.
Right, it just wasn't in her character. And as the investigation unfolded, suspicion quickly fell on Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Howell.
Huck claimed that Crystal had left in the middle of the night after an argument, but his story didn't sit right with a lot of people.
There were inconsistencies in his statements, and his behavior just seemed off.
And then there's the involvement of Brooks's brother, Nick, who was a Bardstown police officer at the time.
Now that's where things get really interesting and complicated.
Yeah, you've got a missing woman, a suspicious boyfriend, and a brother who's a cop in the same town where a decorated officer was murdered just 2 years earlier. You can't help but wonder if there's a connection.
And there's some pretty damning details. When Brooks was being questioned by the police, Nick actually called him during the interview, seemingly trying to coach him on what to say.
That's a major red flag. And then it comes out that traces of what were later confirmed to be bodily fluids were found in the trunk of Nick's police cruiser.
He also failed a polygraph test when asked about Crystal's disappearance.
Now, those are just pieces of circumstantial evidence, but they paint a pretty disturbing picture.
Absolutely. The suspicion surrounding the Hawk brothers just keeps growing. And the investigation takes a sharp turn. Brooks is officially named as the main suspect in Crystal's disappearance.
But without a body, there wasn't enough to charge him.
Right. And Nick is fired from the police force for his lack of cooperation and questionable behavior.
But the story doesn't end there. Brooks's friend Danny Singleton is arrested for perjury. He lied to the police about his whereabouts the night Crystal disappeared.
So now you have to ask yourself, what did Danny know? Who was he trying to protect? Was this just a case of a friend trying to help a friend out, or was there something much bigger at play?
It's like every time you think you're getting close to the truth, another layer of this onion gets peeled back, and the situation becomes even more murky.
It's like Bardstown had become this breeding ground for secrets and lies. And the arrest of Danny Singleton just adds another layer to that narrative.
Right. You got to wonder what was worth lying to the police about. I mean, was he covering for Brooks, or is there something even bigger going on here, something that reaches beyond just the Hawk brothers?
And it's like, just when you think you've wrapped your head around the complexity of it all, tragedy strikes again. November 2016. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, is shot and killed while he's out hunting with his grandson.
It's like a gut punch. Another life lost, another family shattered. And the circumstances surrounding Tommy's death are eerily similar to Officer Ellis's murder.
Both men were seemingly ambushed, targeted with precision. It wasn't just some random act of violence. This was planned. This was calculated.
So we've got these chilling parallels. A murdered police officer, a missing mother, and now the father of that missing woman is dead. All of them connected in some way to the Hawk brothers.
And the timing of Tommy's death is hard to ignore. It happened almost exactly 1 year after Crystal disappeared. It makes you wonder, was this some kind of twisted message, a warning to anyone else who dared to dig too deep?
It's hard not to see the connections, right? But are we forcing a narrative where there isn't one? I mean, is it possible that all of these cases are just tragic coincidences?
Statistically speaking, the chances of a town the size of Bardstown experiencing this many violent crimes in such a short span of time are pretty slim. The idea that these are all isolated incidents becomes harder and harder to believe.
So if we're operating under the assumption that these cases are connected, who or what is at the center of it all?
Is it Brooks Hawk? Is there something rotten within the Bardstown Police Department itself? Or is there another player we haven't even considered?
It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but most of the pieces are missing, and the ones we do have don't seem to fit together.
It's frustrating, it's baffling, and it leaves you with more questions than answers.
So where do we go from here? What can we do as individuals who are following these cases, who are invested in seeing justice served?
Well, for starters, we can't let these cases fade from public memory. Keep the conversation going, share information, raise awareness. Sometimes all it takes is one small detail, one tiny piece of the puzzle to crack a case wide open.
It's like crowdsourcing justice. The more eyes on the case, the better the chance that someone somewhere might hold that missing piece.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of continued pressure. By keeping these cases in the spotlight, by demanding answers, we hold those in power accountable, and we make it harder for the truth to be swept under the rug.
It's like we started with these individual tragedies, these heartbreaking stories, but now we're grappling with something much larger, the possibility of corruption within the very system that's supposed to protect us.
It's a hard pill to swallow, right?
Yeah.
The idea that those sworn to uphold the law might be involved in covering up crimes or even perpetrating them. It shakes you to your core.
And it's not just about abstract ideas of justice. It's about the real-world consequences, the impact these unsolved cases have on the community, the victims' families, everyone who's been touched by these tragedies.
You can't underestimate that ripple effect.
Yeah.
Imagine living in Bardstown, knowing that these crimes remain unsolved, that the perpetrators might still be walking free. That creates a climate of fear, a sense of unease that permeates every aspect of life.
It's like the town itself is holding its breath, waiting for the truth to come out.
And what about the victims' families? The lack of closure, the unanswered questions, it's a wound that never fully heals.
We keep coming back to Crystal Rogers' children. What does this do to their lives? Growing up without their mother, knowing that her disappearance is still shrouded in mystery, it's a burden no child should have to carry.
And it highlights the fact that behind all the theories and speculation, there are real people whose lives have been shattered by these crimes.
We started this deep dive hoping to find answers to these Bardstown mysteries, but maybe that's not the point.
Maybe the real value lies in acknowledging the complexity, in confronting the uncomfortable questions, in recognizing that sometimes the truth remains elusive.
So where do we go from here? What can we do to ensure that justice is pursued even when the path is unclear?
We can't let these cases fade from public memory. Keep the conversation alive. Share information, demand accountability from those in positions of power.
It's like that saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant. By shining a light on these cases, by refusing to let them be forgotten, we honor the victims and we keep the pressure on for answers.
And remember, justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Sometimes it takes time, persistence, and a collective commitment to truth to unravel the most intricate of mysteries.
This deep dive has been a difficult one, but it's been an important one. And to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep digging, keep exploring these cases, and keep the hope for justice alive.